so I am doing the oil change, the first oil change here at 600 miles on the GSX-1000, and it's good to see that there is no metal or anything on the magnet, so that is a good sign. And the oil looks fantastic. I don't yet have any sort of stand, so I'm having to do it with a really low profile, cheap dollar store container, but it worked out fine. And I'm going to attempt to use the long extension and get this filter off without pulling any fairings off. So I will update this video when I get to that point. And as far as oil, she will be drinking that. All right, so I just torqued it down. I guess it calls for 16.5 foot-pounds, so that's what it's set to. And just torqued it and cleaned up the bolt. And now I am going to attempt to do the oil filter without removing any fairings. And it's on the ground on the standard kickstand, so we'll see. All right, so there's the setup I'm gonna attempt with the removal of the filter without removing the fairing. And I'm gonna use a little piece of tinfoil like this. And I'm gonna try and work that up underneath there to kind of minimize the amount that comes out onto the headers and the exhaust there. So we will see how that works. All right, so the oil filter is loose, and that's a good thing, but that Lyle puller, that filter wrench, I'm not a fan of that. So I need to do a little bit more research, and I believe I found the correct size of actual just cap wrench, because that thing relies on springs and stuff like that. It doesn't fit that fantastic. It did loosen the filter, but it slipped off the end, and now I'll have to go wiggle it out of there once the exhaust is cool, because it just slipped off there, so now you can't pull the filter off. But when that cools, when the exhaust cools, I'll be able to go in there and, you know, you have to open it up with your fingers and slip it back up over the top of the filter. All right, so the question has been answered. Yes, you can do this oil change without removing a fairing, and you can even do it on the side stand. But is it easy? No, not really. It's really kind of a pain in the you-know-what. First of all, this is what I was using, which now that I see it's just not ideal. This thing is spring-loaded, so it opens up like this without any fairings on, and if it was all opened up, it'd be just fine. But this thing it's kind of bulky, and the problem came from, you basically have your four header pipes, which basically cradle the filter in there. So getting that off with this attached, it was doable, but it was a pain, and there was just no way to have a drain pan underneath. So I basically had to just forego that, pull the filter off, and let the rest of it drain out on the cardboard. So probably in hindsight, I don't know how long it's gonna take to take the fairing all off, but it probably would be easier to take the whole fairing off and do it that way. But I wanted to see if it was possible. And actually, I think once I get this thing up on spools and actually get a service stand, this will actually go pretty smoothly. I think it'll elevate it up more and it'll be level. So yeah, because when you're doing the oil change also, I was, you know, standing up and leveling the bike out to make sure everything got out of there. So it's possible, but not ideal. Okay, so fairing is removed. So after the whole oil change, dropping the filter, dropping the oil, all of that, no actual stand, just using the side stand. I was actually able to do the oil change without removing the fairing, but this is definitely a live and learn moment, because getting the actual filter back on and tightening it enough to where I would feel comfortable riding it was a different story. The filter's too slippery. There's just nothing to get on there to tighten it with, without having an actual proper cap wrench. So it's definitely doable without removing the fairing if you have a proper cap wrench, but that little style of wrench right there does not tighten, it only loosens. So you cannot re-tighten it enough. And I'm usually a hands only type of guy, hand tight on an oil filter. With a rubber gasket, it's always been fine, but I really couldn't get it to that point to where I actually felt like it was good enough. So long story short, I ended up removing the fairing. So now it's very easily accessible down there. But like I said, if I had an actual cap wrench that just fit on top of the filter, you can actually loosen and tighten with that. And then you could just use the extension to tighten it off. It'd be totally fine. But so there's the fairing right there. And so now I'm gonna tighten it up properly, make sure I feel like it's adequately tight rather than having it drip oil down the road. That would be a joke. So yeah, anyway, as far as what you actually need to remove, this thing is not that big of a deal. It's like 15 minutes and it's probably about 5 minutes once you've done it once. So really what you're gonna be removing, I laid them all out here. So you've got the 5 mils, you have the 3/4 mils right there. You have these giant clips right here that go on the bottom, and then you have these 5 right here. So that is what it requires to remove them. And the locations to all of those, you have those 2 big pushes right here. You have one right there, the other big push right there, which you can just pop out with a flat blade screwdriver. It's easy. Then you're gonna have 1, 2, 3, and 4 right there. You have those 4 right there. And then you're going to have basically right here and right here are where the 5 mils go. And then the 4 mils are 1, 2, and I believe there's a 3rd one right there. That's the 3 there. And then you also have, there's 1 right here. So there's 1 push pin that goes right there that you'll need to remove. And for those, the easiest thing to use, and those are actually the easiest ones by far in my opinion anyway, just a small, tiny little screwdriver or something with just a little end, a little punch, whatever. And you just push it and it pops right out. You just pull right out. So there's that. So this oil change ended up being longer than it needed to be, but I know it's getting done right. And this is my first oil change at 600 miles. So it'll be longer when the second one comes around. So, all right, so I have successfully done the edit to the next service due. I put it at 2,000 miles. I put it exactly 1 year out, although it'll be changed way sooner than that. Ran the factory fill for the recommended 600 miles. So now I just put in the AMSOIL metric 10W40, and I will do it again at 2,000 miles. So basically I'll be putting about 1,400 miles on the second oil change here. So, and then I'll probably go every 2,000 after that. This is what I use to edit it with, just very simple little bread tie. And once you get to the service section and you stick these in here to jump it, you can actually take it back out then and it will stay in the edit mode. So I'm gonna try and zoom in real close here. So the top 2 left and right are actually not the ones I used. I used the tiny ones below. So I was able to just stick them in the tiny ones right below. And for me, that worked perfect, which are actually, so it's that tiny one right there and hold on. It's the tiny one right there and the tiny one right there. So it probably is fine, and I've seen other people use the bigger ones up top, but they fit perfectly, and I've seen someone else do the tiny ones, so I use the tiny ones. And it worked perfectly. So I'm gonna throw this fairing back on, and this is all done. All right, so oil change is done, service light reset, and these are the tools you need. And I did this oil change. This is the first time I've touched this bike. I did the first service, 600 miles on the bike. Like I said, just to recap the video, I actually changed the oil without removing the fairing, sitting on the side stand, which, you know, not ideal. And by the time I got to the end of it, to actually tighten the filter back on, I just was not comfortable with how tight I could actually get it because I just could not get my hands in there properly. So in the end, I actually removed the fairing and tightened it properly with the fairing off, which it did need more. I was correct in my assumption. So long story short, just remove the fairing. It is not even that big of a deal. This fairing was super simple. You know, it comes off, and actually it went on just like butter. I mean, this thing went on so nice. I've done other bikes and I've helped friends with other bikes. I just recently helped someone do a brand new Yamaha R7, and that fairing was a nightmare compared to this one. This bike was so much easier. The fairing went on, and I'm not even kidding, it was like 3 minutes, it was already bolted up. So these push pins were easy. The 4, the 5 millimeter, the 2 on the bottom, you basically have 5 of the push pins, 2 of those, the other larger pins at the bottom, and then you have 3 4 millimeter hex, and you have 2 5 millimeter. So these are the tools you need. I use this to basically loosen up the 2 at the bottom. Okay, so I use that screwdriver for that. This little tiny Phillips I use to push the 5 push pins, and then those pop right out. 5 millimeter, 4 millimeter, torque wrench for torquing the drain bolt to 16.5 pounds, and then a 17 millimeter on the ratchet, and then that's done. So I will not attempt to do the oil change without removing this fairing. So there is my little tutorial.